You have meddled with the primal forces of nature, Mr. Beale, and I won't have it. You will atone. You get up on your little 21-inch screen and you howl about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. There is only IBM and IT&T and AT&T and DuPont, Dow, Union Carbide, and Exxon. Those are the nations of the world now. What do you think the Russians talk about in their councils of state? Karl Marx? They pull out their linear programming charts, statistical decision theories, minimum solutions like the good system analysts that they are, and they compute the price-cost probabilities of their transactions and investments, just like we do. We are no longer living in a world of nations and ideologies, Mr. Beale. The world is a collage of corporations inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. Mr. Beale, it has been that way since man crawled out of the slime. And our children, Mr. Beale, they will live to see that perfect world without war and famine, oppression and brutality. One vast ecumenical holding company for whom all men will work to serve a common profit, in which all men will hold a share of stock, all necessities provided, all anxieties tranquilized, all boredom amused. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel, Mr. Beale. Well, why me, says Beale. Because you're on television, dummy. 60 million people watch you every night, Monday through Friday. I have seen the face of God. You just might be right, Mr. Beale. Hi, I'm Paul Duchesne, and welcome to Mama Paul's video podcast. Today is Thursday, August the 12th, I believe, 2021. And I just read that little piece from the movie Network back in the 80s, and the man who delivered that speech died a few weeks ago. I remember it being in the newspaper, and as a result of that, the guy that played Arthur Jensen, I was sort of inspired to pull out. I have a book that has this whole speech in it, and I've been wanting to read it for a bit, so I just did. There it is. The whole world. There is no democracy. There is no capitalism. The world is a big business. That's what he's sort of saying there. And on that note, I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to look at a couple of magazines that just came out. We've got Adbusters magazine, and these two pieces in the back of me were pullouts from the magazine. Over here on my left, I've got Parabola magazine, which is a little bit more spiritual, and that's the title. The theme is fire. Fire is the theme. And then let's see, over here, I've got a couple of the articles in the newspaper from Tucker Carlson's little trip to Hungary, if you can believe that. Unbelievable what's going on. It seems to be getting worse by the day. Today is Thursday, and in fact, tomorrow, Friday, I believe Lindell, the pillow guy, has predicted that Donald Trump will be reinstated tomorrow as the rightful president in the United States once again. I just got the Progressive magazine. Progressive, it just came in today, and it's an issue about school. I don't rush to read articles about school, but what Republicans believe was on page 17, and this was just, I've known this, I keep hearing this, but every time you look at the numbers, it gets more and more astonishing. The bottom one, let me just go to the bottom. 65% do not consider Trump to be at blame for what happened on January 6th. Just over half agree the riot was led by violent left-wing protesters trying to make Trump look bad. This is from Reuters. May 21st, 2021. 65% of the Republicans think that Trump had nothing to do with January 6th, and it was done by left-wingers trying to make Trump look bad. Can you make this stuff up? 77% of the Republicans think that the coronavirus came from a laboratory in China and that they released it on purpose. Whether it came from the laboratory in China and whether some American money that was funding certain scientific research wound up in the Wuhan clinic, which it may have, and the virus may have been come out of the of this laboratory. I suspect that it wasn't done on purpose, and I think that's where the thing goes really, really off the wall. 23% of the Republicans agree that the government, the media, and the financial world are all controlled by a group of Satan-worshipping pedophiles. Satan-worshipping pedophiles who run a global child sex trafficking operations. May 2021, the Public Relations Research. 61% believe that the election was stolen from Trump, and more than half consider him to be the true president. I don't know what Republicans believe. Okay, there it is. What Republicans believe. There you go. Okay. Adbusters. Adbusters magazine. Adbusters magazine, I have talked about this a little bit in the past. I get the magazine regularly. I have the last 15 or 20 years of it. The covers are usually pretty bleak. They're very dark. They usually start off pretty heavily. They have a tremendous amount of major pictures in these magazines. It's absolutely unbelievable. This here, for instance, this is a picture in the magazine of the pictures that are in back of me here right now. Adbusters is put out by a group of, it's put out of Canada, and it's definitely, it sort of verges between philosophy and political economy and economics. And it takes a very negative view of capitalism, to say the least. And this particular issue opened up rather nicely. And then they immediately got into a little situation. They were asking, what is reality? And they had this little picture of the glass of water over here. And the glass of water is sitting on the edge of the edge of a book on a table. So the water is on a book on the table, sort of barely holding up. They have another picture of another bottle of water falling over here. Why do modern departments of philosophy have no place for mysticism? That was the question they asked. Why do modern departments of philosophy have no place for mysticism? And I've been thinking this through myself quite a bit. And where I come from is I would like to sort of integrate some Buddhist philosophy into what I see as traditional Platonic philosophy. In fact, at one point, I did a paper on existentialism, and I called it sort of classical existentialism, and it was sort of the way I was interpreting Aristotle early on. He seemed to actually be touching on some of the 20th century ideas about what existential is all about, and I called it Aristotelian existentialism. But anyway, back to this. Philosophy leads us into political economy. Political economy is a branch of philosophy. It's not a branch of science. Now, since the 70s, there has been an attempt to turn political economy into a science. And this has been, and in fact, interestingly, The Spell of Our Senses was one of the main articles in here. And they're talking about the word senses and casting a spell. to spell a word or to cast a magic spell. The two meanings were originally one and the same. In order to use the new technology, the new play of written shapes, these are the words, to learn to read and write with the alphabet was to learn a new form of magic, to exercise a new form of power in the world. But it also meant casting a spell on our own senses. It's only when we recognize how profoundly it has altered our experience of nature, how profoundly it has altered our senses, that we can begin to use writing responsibly, because we see how potent and profound an effect it has had. The written word itself is causing your mind to think in certain ways. There's a major book quite a bit ago, The Alphabet and the Goddess, which talked about this type of thing. And the idea that that spelling, you can either spell a word out or you can cast the spell, and they both came from the same. They're both derived from the same derivation. Is I think very, very interesting, to say the least. What we get into here, if we continue to operate our global economy on the neoclassical paradigm, they have a little donut over here on the side page over here, on the neoclassical paradigm, then we will experience the mother of all crashes and spiral inexorably into a very long, dark age. This magazine has been arguing against neoclassical economics from day one, and they get into very heavy things with violent attacks on the system, etc. Adbusters are the people that brought us Occupy movement. It was the Adbusters magazine who created the idea for the Occupy movement, who branded it, who picked the dates for it, and who advised people how to get there and how to organize. It was Adbusters magazine that did this whole Occupy Wall Street, this whole Occupy movement. They have also been responsible for Buy Nothing Day, which is sort of the day, I think the day after Thanksgiving, when everybody goes out to buy and everything. They've always encouraged people not to buy it. They've done a lot of things. The most impressive that they really pulled off was the Occupy Wall Street. But on this one page here, we've got a picture of Paul Krugman and Larry Summers, and the usual suspects that are currently in control of the economy. And there's a quote here that they put in the magazine a few times. Before economics can progress, it must abandon its suicidal formalism. Its suicidal formalism. And who's this written by? Robert Heilbronner. Robert Heilbronner is the guy that I had as my political economy teacher at the New School back at the 1970, 71, 72. And he was the one who wrote The Worldly Professor, The Worldly Economist. He was a classical economist. And when he talking about formalistic formalism, what they mean by formalism is, in economics we talk about the individual maximizing his utility maximization. So in other words, there's some objects out there to be worked with, and in a neoclassical mode, the worker will utilize these materials to create a functioning object for society, which then can be sold. It's not necessarily what he needs to sustain himself. And there's the difference between formalistic and substantive economics. These are the two terms that they use quite a bit. Formalistic versus a substantive. And with formalistic, you assume that there's rational decision making and logical decision making. Well, it turns out people don't make logical, rational decisions all the time at all. Quite common when they don't make them. In fact, they probably don't make them more often than they make them. And in fact, just recently, within the last year or two, a couple of Nobel Prizes have been awarded to people who have been studying humanistic kind of interactions with the economy that aren't formalistic. So in formalistic economics, you wind up creating these huge formulas which are going to predict what's going to happen. Well, if you look at this over the last 50 years, these predictions are generally wrong. They're generally not right. You find somebody who figured out what was going to happen, and he predicted this, blah, 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 blah. He's 1 out of 20. there's usually one guy that predicted what was going to happen and 19 that predicted the wrong thing. And that's been going on for like a really long time. So, interestingly, let me get the book back here again. I'm going to talk about this formalism and this substantive economic a little bit more as we go along. I have about a half a dozen different economists who have been writing about these types of things for the last 10, 15 years. So this isn't out of the blue. This didn't just come out of nowhere or anything like that. Interestingly, the magazine, I'm only about a third of the way through of it so far. But interestingly, as it progresses, it usually winds up on a more positive note. So they start off on a negative note and generally tell you what's wrong, and then they give you some alternatives, and they generally end on a positive note, but not always. But over here, this really grabbed me, and then it made the connection to the Parabola magazine I'm going to do in a second here. Let me come back to myself here. Before I go there, I'm going to mention the two things that are in back of me. What's in back of me here, this one on my right here, this is this that they had. So a Copernican shift in economic thinking. They're basically predicting that we are on the edge of a shift. There's going to be a tipping point, and things are going to shift and change. And right now, we have a system where finance and the economy are the core of what we've got. This is where everything is centered on. Finance and the economy. The society and the natural world, the green thing is the natural world. That's secondary. So the first thing we're looking at is finance, the economy, then the society, and then the natural world. Well, a substantive economic outlook would be the natural world would be the main thing that's in the middle. The natural world is where we start. And we build a society around the natural world. We then have an economy that supports that and a financial system that supports the economy. So a Copernican shift in economic thinking. Economics here, they call this BIONOMICS. BIONOMICS, that's what they refer to this as. So that was in this magazine. If you want to get the magazine this month, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, you can have a little wall poster to hang up in your living room. This over here, the Kick It Over Manifesto. Now this is the type of writing that Adbusters has traditionally done year after year. And basically, we have known since inception that your measure of economic progress, the gross domestic product, is flawed and incomplete, yet it's the global standard, and it doesn't include forests vanishing, species perishing, human lives, ruined. It doesn't measure the human factors. It just measures what the people on Wall Street want to care about, which is the money that's going into their pocket. So this Kick It Over Manifesto, I don't know if we're going to be at a point. You can go to kickitover.org to see the whole manifesto written, if you're interested, and check it out. So that was the front end of the magazine. The back end of the magazine, and we get this quote here. There's only 2 pages left. There it is. Its existence is a free gift from the sun. Existence is a free gift from the sun. And the last page, live suddenly without thinking. E.E. Cummings. Live suddenly without thinking by E.E. Cummings. The previous one was, I don't know who he is, Nicholas George Rogan. Existence is a free gift from the sun. Well, this brought me over to Parabola magazine, and I bought these two the same day last week. Parabola, the issue is, like I said, it's on fire. They always do a theme. It might be hope, it might be transcendence, it might be love. This month it's fire. And actually it's not a monthly magazine. I think it's a quarterly magazine. Yeah, it's a quarterly magazine. And towards, there were 2 things that were really interesting. The one was the article about aliens from outer space. As far as fire goes, here's this there's a fire picture for you, boy. Holy mackerel. And the quote they have here is from Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. He's one of my 20th century heroes. The day will come when, after harnessing the ether, the wind, the tides, gravitation. We shall harness for God the energy of love. And on that day, for the second time in the history of the world, man will have discovered fire. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, basically equating the energy of love with the energy coming from fire and equating that with God. Now, on the back page here, this is what got me really, made the connection between what we're talking about here and the earth. The sun, it ends with the end point of the magazine, the last article, end point of the magazine. They always do a last page, one little thing here. There's a quote from Oliver Twist, from Charles Dickens in Oliver Twist. But before that, we're talking about the sun. The heat and light produced by the sun result from nuclear fusion at its core, producing hot plasma heated to incandescence. Interestingly, plasma, the most common form of matter in the universe, has been proposed as the substance of the soul. And they go back to an article here from 2012 in Parabola magazine. The most common form of matter in the universe is plasma, and it's been proposed as the substance of the soul. And for me, that was the connection between Parabola magazine and Existence is a free gift from the sun. Existence is a free gift from the sun. And the sun is where is what we were talking about in this article. The sun is not on fire. It's not burning. Fire is the rapid oxidation of a material in the process of combustion. The key word is oxidation. There is no oxygen on the sun. So therefore no fire and no burning. The heat and light produced on the sun result from fusion, as I read earlier, producing hot plasma, the most common form of matter in the universe. Maybe it's the substance of the soul. Now, I'm, as a bit of a Buddhist, technically the Buddhists don't believe in a soul. They say there is no soul. I have another hit on that whole thinking, and I think actually if you substitute the word mind for soul, you'll wind up on similar territory there. The article that grabbed me initially in the magazine was about the fire in the sky, UFOs and what they may reveal. UFOs and what they may reveal. And it's sort of interesting because you've got pictures in the paper, you have articles in the paper, and just recently there was a major, I think the Pentagon came out and released some previously material that had previously been classified. And Carl Jung noted later in his life, Carl Jung in the late 50s, later in his life, Carl Jung noted that unexplained spacecraft bear a close resemblance to what the ancients saw as signs in the heavens. In his slim 1957 tract, Flying Saucers, A Modern Myth of Things Seen in the Sky, Jung writes about threatening situation in the world today. People are beginning to see that everything is at stake. The projection creating fantasy soars beyond the reality of earthly organization into interstellar space, where the rulers of human fate, the gods, once had their abode in the planets. Under these circumstances, it would not be surprising that sections of the community who ask themselves were visited by visions, by a widespread myth seriously believed in by some and rejected as absurd by others. So pretty much Jung is pretty much saying that this is a psychological thing going on here. And he goes through the rather, he goes back to the ancients. And he talks about the ancients and their description of these flying saucers. And sure enough, the ancients' description of the flying saucers are very, very similar to the same descriptions we have today. They're sort of conically shaped, and they hover about, and they take off and run around all over the place. And in the story here, they quote from Whitley Strieber, who wrote the book Communion, and he's the guy that supposedly is taken up into the spacecraft and is, well, they're looking into the depths of his soul. He gets sodomized with a mechanical device. The article goes on to talk about the connections between the spiritual and the sexual. In the final analysis, it conflates submission to a higher power with sexual cruelty. The author also ignores the resonance of the UFO archetypes with the ultimate goal of technocratic elites, enticing the public with dazzling gadgets, futuristic, spiritual transcendence by material means. So the technocrats are advertising that we are going to achieve a spiritual transcendence through material means. Put that into your mind and try to make sense of it. Returning to Jung's theory of flying saucers as psychic projections, it seems that UFOs symbolize a future in which technologically advanced entities impose their will on hapless human beings. Whatever is ontological status, whatever it's ontological, it's godlike status. This is no cause for despair, though. Higher worlds are beckoning just beyond. So in the magazine here, they're going to talk about higher worlds and other consciousness and things like that, beyond the technocratic gobbledygook of the spaceships. I don't particularly think they're there, or there's anything to them other than that they are psychic phenomena. But let me put the book down. Okay. Whoa! There it goes. Oh, okay. So, we did the Republicans, we did the Adbusters and Parabola, and I was going to move over real quickly to this Tucker Carlson thing. This is really disturbing. I've got, what, three articles over here. Fox News firebrand visits Hungary to laud its authoritarian leader. Tucker Carlson, Viktor Orban are a bad omen for America. Tucker Carlson is on I cannot watch the guy. He's got these zombie-like eyes. He sort of looks like he's got two egg whites floating around in them all the time. And he seems to lie continuously on television. He comes up with these incredible stories, and he sounds really good doing it. Well, if anybody got a chance to watch Tucker Carlson in Hungary, it looked really good. It really did. There were a few thousand people in this large crowd. It looked like a nice crowd that showed up. It didn't look like there was any totalitarian impression. Carlson was probably at his best, delivering a really interesting and very comic, and it looked good. He looked really good. He, honest to God, looked really good. The disturbing thing is Orban. Viktor Orban himself is an authoritarian, and he lies all the time. He made tons of money early on, and Viktor Orban started out as a progressive. That didn't work out so well, and he started getting a little bit corrupt, and he started making all sorts of money in real estate and a bunch of other places. And the more money he made, the more authoritarian he got, the more fascistic he got, the more he got with closer ties to Russia. He's imposed all sorts of strictures down on the country. The book by Ben Rhodes, I showed you this book a little bit ago, Ben Rhodes, After the Fall. And Ben Rhodes was an advisor to Trump, and to Obama. And after Obama left office and Trump was elected, he went around the world, and one of the main places he went was to Hungary. And he went around to understand what had become, how we had gotten to this authoritarian stage in our history. How the authoritarians around the world were so readily accepted. We're talking about the Philippines, we're talking about China, we're talking about Russia, we're talking about Hungary, we're talking about parts of South America. All over the planet. We're talking about America. Hello, America. Donald Trump, authoritarian, gangster. Anyway, he spends quite a bit of time in Hungary over here. And one of the little riffs from the United States, having exported to the world unleashed capitalism, ungoverned social media, and a militarized foreign policy, has now seen its pathologies weaponized by our enemies. They've thrown it all back at us. So we introduced the form of capitalism we've got today. God knows what you want to call it this week. The social media, the whole Facebook, Twitter, everybody's watching everybody and talking to everybody here. And the militarized foreign policy, which has been our trademark since World War II. So these are the things we've sort of unleashed on the rest of the world, and now it's coming back at us. He himself is angry at what America has become. 4 years of Donald Trump seem to have unseated the patient incrementalism. The patient incrementalism that Obama instilled in Rhodes himself. The funniest line in the book belongs to Obama and reminds him of his almost unearthly equanimity, Obama's. And this was Obama's quote to Rhodes. Trump is for a lot of white people what O.J. Simpson's acquittal was to a lot of black folks. You know it's wrong, but it feels good. You know it's wrong, but it feels good. Okay, so The Authoritarian Playbook, After the Fall by Ben Rhodes. Keep your eye on Tucker Carlson. He is seriously dangerous. Fox News is seriously dangerous. These things are not jokes. And I'm watching Rachel the other night, and I'm casually mentioning to my wife, guys, there's a story about these people in Tennessee that are literally. There was a school. The school's coming. The school's going to start. There was a meeting about masks and vaccination and things like this. And this one fellow had been arguing in favor of masks, apparently, and he gets screamed out of the room, screamed through the parking lot, yelled at, threatened. We know who you are. We're going to get you. I mean, it's like complete insanity. And the funny thing is this stuff is coming. It's coming from the right wing, and the right wing is getting it in many cases from Russia. Quickly jump back to the little wall over there with me. This last story here, Russia disinformation targets vaccine fears. Russia disinformation targets vaccine fears. The Russians have been pushing this since the vaccine came out. And they seem to be the leading proponents behind the situation we're in today. Well, I think we went over time here a little bit. It's 32 minutes. Okay, let's wrap it up there, and I won't do the little other Rachel show. Alrighty, peace, patience, persistence, and I'll see you as soon as we can. Thanks for joining in.